Hey YouTube, Gordon Miller here. Okay, so I had a buddy of mine whose mom got sick, and he was forced to retire from his job in law enforcement that he'd had for quite a long time. And his mom needed to go on dialysis and was in dialysis Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and needed him to take her there and things like that. Dialysis is like a 3 or 4 hour long process, and it was very difficult for him to maintain his regular job and make sure that she was getting the treatment that she needed and things like that. So unfortunately, he left his job, and a few years later, his mom passed away. And after she passed away, he and I reconnected, and he he we were talking about what he was doing and how life was going since his mom had passed, and so he said, "Oh, it's been great." And I was like, "Great, okay. Well, what have you been doing to pay the bills?" And he's like, "Oh, I drove Uber." And I was like, my initial reaction was, "Man, you can't make any money driving Uber. I mean, what the hell? I mean, I hear those guys like make like $8 an hour." And he's like, "No, no, no, it's great." He goes, "You gotta have the right strategy." And so I was like, "All right, well, what's the right strategy?" And so he goes, tells me the strategy and things like that. And I'm like, well, that's kind of an interesting story. And at the time, this is about a year or so ago, I was working on the framework for one of the books that I'm working on. And one of the sections talks about alternate ways to finance entrepreneurial ventures. So everything from cryptocurrency to Forex trading and a bunch of other stuff like that, regular stocks. But also, we got to talking about the fact that, well, he goes, you should put a thing in the chapter about driving for Uber. And I'm like, well, come on, dude. I mean, everything I've read, these guys don't make any money. And they're like, no, you can. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what, I can't take your word for it. Your experience may be vastly different. And he's like, well, you have the app. Why don't you turn it on and try it out for yourself? And so because my wife is legally blind, and when the kids, before they were getting an opportunity to drive, I had actually signed up as a driver to see what the background check process was like. I knew I would pass because I have my security clearance, but I wanted to see what the process was like, and I did. I was already an authorized driver. All my information was already in the system, so I logged on one night and slid the slider over to active, and just decided to go online and see what it was all about. So I made a decision after driving for one night, driving Uber, that I was going to give this a chance, and I was going to drive essentially this is about early November of last year, ahead of Thanksgiving. I was going to drive from like Thanksgiving to New Year's. And for me, there's a couple of different reasons that make this kind of interesting. So my father, as I've mentioned in a couple of posts and videos and stuff like that, was a horrible, alcoholic. He died with 58 points on his license, most all convictions for DUI, and which is, I think, is like a 6-point offense. So he had like 9 DUIs on his license in like a 5-year period. And he went to jail for DUI for 30 days, and his license was suspended for a year and a couple times, I think, 6 months and then a year in there. But so the problem really was the fact that I thought there were some opportunities for people who are making good choices to be able to choose to use Uber. I donate some of my time and make some money doing that, and just see whether or not my friend's strategy worked out. It'd make a great chapter for the book. And so what I'm going to do here in this video is talk about some of the things that I learned in the process, and other stuff will make its way into the book. So, so the first thing is that, so driving from, I would say it was like early first, like a week or two before Thanksgiving, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, to about 2 weeks after New Year's is where I drove. I decided to drive a little bit on either side just to kind of get a sense. But I wanted to, between Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, I figured that's a tight space in there, and I would get some decent data. And so if the first night I did it, I actually just turned the app on and didn't pay any attention to any strategy. I just went where it told me to go and picked people up and took them where they wanted to go and so on. So there were a lot of problems with that strategy. I think the average on a 12-hour, I drove I would drive 4 to 8 hours and some runs, and then I would drive some overnights and some early mornings and, throughout the day and all night, and just to kind of get a sense of different times and things like that. But typically when you just turn it on and drive 6 to 8 hours, you can only make roughly about $12.50 an hour because it gets relatively inefficient because you're not paying any attention to where you should be going. I'm lucky I drove in my local area here where I've lived most of my life. I know the area really well. I know the patterns and trends of everything. So it was fairly easy for me to have some inside information that helped me kind of make that make sense. So the second day, I attempted to use my friend's strategy, and what I was able to do was, I got it up to about $22.50 an hour. Turning it off and on and doing various things and paying attention to parts of his strategy. And so I called my friend back and I go, hey, look, I wasn't able to make, the money you said. You said I could make like $32.50 an hour, and I made like $22.50, which was better than I made last night, which was $12.50 an hour. And he's like, well, did you do exactly what I told you? And I said, well, no. I mean, I'm a hell of a lot smarter than you are. So, of course, I was trying to improve on that strategy. And he goes, just do exactly what I said. And I'm like, okay. So, third night, I drove an 8-hour shift. And sure enough, I followed his strategy to the letter, didn't deviate at all. And I made about $32.50 an hour. So he was right. And the really interesting thing is that it's amazing that over the same 8-hour period, in roughly the same conditions, I mean, same time of night, same weather, same vehicle, same attitude, I was wearing kind of the same thing, there was really no difference. And I picked Friday and Saturday nights sometimes, and I picked weekdays and a bunch of other stuff, but all these were basically Friday and Saturday nights, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and things like that. So, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And having taken the samples a couple different times, I was able to rerun the sample, and I was actually able to even improve the strategy overall. And I, about the time Thanksgiving showed up, somebody from Uber Corporate was in town, and I picked up he and his friends who live here in Richmond, and we were talking about the fact that my car qualified for comfort mode, and that comfort mode was coming to Richmond, and that when he got back to San Francisco, he was going to turn on comfort mode for Richmond, and that happened like 3 days before Christmas, so that was great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And we were discussing it, and he asked, so how are you doing? And I told him the story about my friend and how it was great for people who have relatives who are sick that need help, and you can drive off hours, and it works out well that way. And he's like, well, what do you make? And I said, well, ironically, based on my buddy's strategy and some optimizations that I've done, I consistently make over $40 an hour. And I said, in the last 2 hours, including this trip that I'm on with you, I'm up to $50 an hour for 2 hours. And I think that night, I had 5 or 6 hours at $50 an hour. So it was possible to make like $300 in a 6-hour period at $50 an hour. And that was pretty unheard of. And so this employee from Uber said, he goes, well, if you're making like 50 bucks an hour, that makes you like the highest grossing Uber driver in your area. And I'm like, well, that's good to know. It's interesting. I mean, I'll do more videos on Uber if you guys want it. I mean, put it in the comments and things like that. It's an interesting thing. I mean, I'll put it all in the book as well. But rather than waiting for the book, if you guys want more detailed stuff on Uber, I'll do more videos on it. But it was an interesting experience, and I think the thing that I enjoyed the most about it was really connecting with people. I had a great time. I mean, I made about 1,000 a week for the 16 weeks or something like that, that I was driving for Uber. The average I was working, a full-time kind of thing over the holidays when I wasn't really doing anything else. Ended up with $1,000 a week on those, so about 4,000 a month. And for the month of December, I guess it was just December and half of November and half of January. So I guess it's really only about $8,000. But it was a great time. I would say about a third of the trips involved relatively little communication at all. I mean, no real interaction. About a third really were a lot of fun. I mean, about a third were fine, but they weren't really, it was, decent conversation and decent time, but, I mean, they just wanted to get to where they were going and, things like that. About 10% were really, pretty difficult. They were just annoying. I got some great stories. I mean, I guess I will make some of the videos about the great stories, like the guy who tried to buy weed off of me, and the couple having sex in the backseat of my car and stuff like that. So it's just, whatever. But it's an interesting situation. But but the business model does work, and there are some very specific things you can do to make sure that you don't end up making the same kind of mistakes that most people make. And so I probably will do some more videos if you guys want. But the answer to your question is, if I were to work 2,000 hours a year, what could I expect to make? You could very easily make $33.50 an hour using the right strategy. That's about $67,000 a year. The average income for people in this country is like $54,000 a year. So, obviously, we were making a lot more than 10 or 15, 10, 12, $15 an hour that most people are used to making. And yes, it's a lot of wear and tear on your car. I mean, in the essentially 8 to 10 weeks that I drove, I put 20,000 miles in my car. So, I'm glad it was the Volkswagen and not like the BMW X5M that I had before this. So, it's kind of crazy, but it was an interesting time, and there's gas cost, and there's increased insurance costs because you have to have the special rider, and there's also all the other increased maintenance cost and everything else like that to consider. So, but you do get the mileage deduction at 58 cents a mile and things like that. So most of that money gets, you get the tax deductions for all your mileage and for the repairs associated with that. So, technically, if you do it right and you keep the right records and everything else, you do okay. So I wouldn't worry about it. But I do recommend it. It was a good time. I think out of the three things that I learned the most, and I'll give you the three lessons that I learned the most about during this whole thing. And make alert go away there. So number one was the people who use Uber the most are the people who can least afford it. So I think that's kind of unfortunate, but I went on a number of runs where they were paying essentially between $12 and $18 to Uber to work, where they were going to work for probably around $12 an hour, maybe 15, and then they were going to Uber home. So that's going to put them in the $30 to almost $40 range, and that's about half of what they're going to make in their paycheck, or at least a third. And so then, it's a third of their before tax income and probably half of their after tax income just to get to work. So I don't think many people did the math on that, but a lot of people don't have any choice. I mean, there are a lot of people with DUIs that, are making the choice to have to Uber to work because their license are suspended. There are a lot of people that had crashes because they drink and drive and ended up in an accident or hit a deer on the way home, or stuff like that. All kinds of things that with where they ended up in the car. So it can be challenging, and it was an interesting situation. But I met a lot of really great people, and the great people weren't the ones you would think. I mean, the biggest assholes were probably the the richest, most annoying lawyers. In fact, one called and reported me to Uber for, first of all, for driving too fast, which, he was the one that needed to get to where he was going. We were only going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. So, and then I went through a yellow light, so I didn't have to slam on my brakes. And then I also hit my brakes at one instance to avoid an accident. So I got basically written up for driving too fast, you know, um, uh, not applying my brakes and going through the light and then applying my brakes. So, it's like, make up your damn mind. He was an attorney who was in town on a case. He was having a bad time. His client was not doing very well in this case, judging from the conversation he was having on the phone in the car. And he decided he was going to take it out on me. Well, it's okay. It's all right. But the number one thing really was that majority of people who use Uber are the kind of people who typically can't afford it. The other thing that I really learned is that those same folks in lower income areas that live in low income housing, that work regular jobs, frankly have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go work on the shipping or production line or in the Amazon warehouse or wherever it is. Um, those are some of the nicest people that care the most. They also tip the most, not relative to the fare, but relative to their income. So if you look at how much the fare costs them and how much they're going to make, guys that were going to make $100 an hour that tip me $3, that's 3% of what they're about to make in the next hour, as opposed to guys that are working for $9 an hour that tip me $2, and that's 10% of what they're going to make over the next hour, and so the tips are actually 3 times higher relative to their income from folks in lower income areas. And because of that experience too, I refuse to refer to something affectionately as the hood anymore. There's no more the hood. People who don't make a lot of money live in areas where they can afford to live. And, I don't think anybody that I ran into enjoys living in, some of the more economically depressed areas, but they can't afford to live anywhere else. And I'm sure they would love to live in great neighborhoods and big houses, and they just don't make the kind of money that allows that to happen. And they live where they can live. And it was a very eye-opening and very humbling experience. So, never again will you hear me say something about, that guy is from the hood or whatever. Just, some of the best people I know that I got to meet during that process make the least amount of money in this country. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for having the opportunity to spend time with them. I hope that I was able to make their day a little brighter. And I enjoyed and appreciated and respected the opportunity to help them get to work and do whatever they needed to do. So number one, the people who typically can least afford it are using Uber the most. The second one is the people who use Uber the most and can least afford it are typically the best tippers, and they're just great people. And three, the people that are driving Uber and everybody's an independent contractor. They would essentially be my competitors if you consider it. Um, the Uber app itself does not do a very good job of helping drivers maximize their potential to earn income. And I think that's I think that's horrible. I think that for whatever reason, the app really is subpar. I mean, it's a horrible navigation app. It's wrong 90% of the time. I just feel like, when I was part of the angel group that had the opportunity to invest in various rideshare services like Uber and also Uber and Lyft and things like that early on. Um, I had my concerns about driver safety and rider safety and things like that. And but I just don't think that Uber is doing enough to help the drivers earn the most amount of money. And in fact, some cases, in like especially scheduled trips, especially long trips, where the fare might be, it might be an hour long, scheduled fare that is from Richmond to Norfolk, which is like an hour and a half away, almost 2 hours, and the fare would normally be like, uh, you know, 150, $200. Uh, the rider is paying $200, but I only get paid $80. So, they're paying 190, 185 to Uber, and Uber's paying me 80, 85 to get them there, and they're taking half of the money. I just don't think I think that Uber is taking way too much money. That amount of money fluctuates, it varies, it's different. And it's different for every trip. It's based on some algorithm, I guess they have, but I think the algorithm sucks. And they have to realize that these drivers are really, they're not a disposable commodity. There isn't just going to be another, driver coming along. And I had a lot of people that were requesting me that were like, hey, you're my favorite driver. Could I request you and things like that? Like, no, unfortunately not. I mean, there isn't or wasn't at the time. I understand they're adding that feature now where you can favorite drivers and, things like that. I do see where Lyft actually still notifies me. I drove Lyft just for 1 or 2 nights just to see what the difference was like. And the difference in the applications are actually very different. And it helped me understand better how I would build an app that would be completely different on the driver's side. And the driver experience and the user experience in both apps are horrible. They really are at so many levels. And they need so much work on the driver app on both Lyft and on Uber. And also the customer experience is horrible. It's so difficult for them to add stops, and it's so difficult for them to change things. And, it was frustrating for the customers and frustrating for the drivers and things like that. But, so, Uber doesn't do enough to really help people who are devoting a bunch of time to try and make money. If they were more intelligent, if their algorithm was better, or if they had an open architecture where I could design an app that would then help the drivers, then it would create an opportunity to be able to solve a lot of these problems. Now, I can publish the strategy in my book, and I can make videos about it and things like that. And there'll be some of you out there who, can use that strategy, extrapolate it into different markets and so on, and go from making, $12 or $15 an hour to making $25 or $35 an hour or more. And that's great. Congratulations. I was actually surprised when I was in New York City here recently that the average New York City Uber driver doesn't make more than about $30 an hour, and which is insane. I mean, and it's because traffic moves so slow, and they just can't complete a trip fast enough. And most Uber drivers in a 12-hour shift in New York City only make $300, and I'm able to make $300 in as little as 6 hours here in Richmond. So there's lots of issues. So I think the last thing I want to kind of close with is one of the reasons that I also decided to continued driving, and I continued to, before the coronavirus and thing, I was still picking up shifts and stuff like that. But so um, one of the biggest reasons that I decided to do this, aside from proving the business model and also kind of paying homage to people making better choices, since my dad, obviously didn't, Uber wasn't an option for him. So his DUIs, thankfully, he never was in an accident, never killed anybody, but I like to think that, if there's no drivers available, people are going to make bad choices. And I don't want people who've been drinking or people who are out with friends and their friends have been drinking and they don't want to ride home with their friends who've been drinking, they can call an Uber. And but if the drivers aren't there, especially in the middle of the night, I used to enjoy driving the 6 o'clock p.m. to 6 a.m. shift because nothing ever good happens after midnight. And the day before Christmas Eve, which was actually 3 a.m. Christmas Eve morning, was really kind of what brought it home for me. So it was 3:15 in the morning in Richmond, and I got a request from Caroline. And I always know when I get a request after 3 o'clock in the morning from some female name. I know it's not going to be good. It typically never is. And this wasn't. So she had gotten into an argument while driving with her boyfriend, and been in the relationship about a year. And the address for the request was in a remote, deserted industrial area, and here in the Richmond area. And I got there, and there wasn't anybody there at the location, at the address. And there was a brightly lit sign for some company that was nearby. And I couldn't find her. I was texting her and said, I'm here by the brightly lit sign. And about a couple minutes later, she goes, oh, I see you. And she comes around this building, and she's young, short, thin, blonde, 23. And she's had the hell beat out of her. And so absolutely beautiful, prior to her boyfriend getting a hold of her. And so she told me that, he pulled off the main road into this abandoned industrial area and parked the car. They were having an argument about something. He goes around the car and pulls her out of the car and bangs her head against the side of the car, knocks her unconscious on the ground, and gets back in the car and drives away. And so it's 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere and in this industrial area. And this guy has just literally beaten his girlfriend unconscious and has left her on the ground for dead. And thankfully her phone was in her jeans pocket, and purse was still in the car. So, I tried to encourage her to call the police. She wouldn't, she wanted me to take her home. So I did. And, but she's in shock. And the entire time, she's saying, she goes, how can somebody do this, something like this? And, I'm like, I don't know. There's no real answers for something like that. So there's been a couple of times after that, like 4 o'clock in the morning, where somebody wakes up and they're immediately pretty sober, realizing they're someplace they've never been before with somebody they don't really know, and they want to leave. And so they call an Uber. And, or I've had a few times where 3:30 in the morning, somebody's having a fight with their boyfriend and they're trying to leave his apartment. And, the one time that I had to get out of the car, I didn't do anything except just get out of the car, was, this guy was preventing her from leaving his apartment. She was trying to exit the front door, and they were standing on the front porch, and he was holding her from leaving to accept the ride. And so I got out. Of course, I'm 6'2" and, 295 pounds. And I was like, are we going to have a problem here? And he takes one look at me, and he's, he's about 175 pounds, and, she's about 105 pounds. And so, I was like, I suggest you let her go. And so he let her go, and she got in the car, and she was like, thanks. I've been trying to leave for the last hour. I finally was able to get to my phone to secretly call for an Uber. Thanks for waiting. Because I think I waited for like 5 minutes before the door even opened, and she was trying to find an opportunity to get out. So, you know, it's, I'm very lucky. I've got three boys and no daughters. And, but I tell you what, um, if I had a daughter, I would make sure that she was on my family plan with Uber and could Uber anywhere she wanted until she's 50. So, it just doesn't make any sense. Girls in this world these days need options. And that option includes getting the fuck out of wherever it is that you are. If you're in a bad situation, your girlfriend's been drinking, your boyfriend's been drinking, your boyfriend's getting abusive, you're just fed up with the situation you're in. People are doing drugs or alcohol around you and you don't want to be a part of that. Then by all means, yeah, you need an escape route. Call an Uber. And maybe with any luck, I'll be the one picking you up. So it was my pleasure to make sure that people got home. That overnight from sort of 2 a.m. until 5 a.m. Was probably some of the most difficult times I've ever seen. But it was also the most rewarding from the standpoint of, sort of my mission to help change people's lives. My goal is to improve people's lives and make their lives better than they were, when I met them. So, if I wasn't there, sometimes I'm the only driver for 25 miles in a radius, 18 to 20 miles away. And that means that if I wasn't there, there'd be nobody there. So, it was an interesting thing. So I started out trying to prove my buddy's business model. I managed to improve on the business model and got it up to over $40 an hour, where he got it up to $33.50, $32.50. But in the process, I learned a lot about people and I learned a lot about myself. And it was a great time. There's some, there's some phenomenal people out there in this world. And while we're all struggling under this COVID-19 coronavirus lockdown, just remember that let's be a little extra nice to each other. There's some great people out there that are suffering too. All right, thanks.